transferred to another ship that was staying out there because there were, that ship was the LST 828, had no electrician's mates at all, and we had all of two. It was lean times. So I had to go. I was a junior man, and off I went. So then I stayed in Westpac until, for that whole year, the rest of 45, all of 46. And I finally came home on a little tanker on New Year's Eve. We arrived in San Francisco Bay. So all the hoopla about the war was over. We were not necessarily welcomed. We weren't welcomed at all, actually, except in the bars. And it was sort of a letdown, but yeah, it was nice to be home after all that time. Then I didn't do an awful lot. I didn't go get assigned to any other ships until it was time for me to be discharged, which my end of my enlistment came in 1947, and I left. But of course, at the same time, they conned us all, most of us, into signing up for the reserves. The expression was, if you ever get called, if you ever have another war, you're going to be one of the first ones to go, of course. And you will not lose rank. You'll get longevity benefits, and it's a good idea. So anyway, so I joined the reserves and went home. Got married after a couple years, learned a trade, and stayed in the reserves until years and years later, I was recalled to active duty. And that was for, Kennedy was president then. He called up just certain units, and I was training on a destroyer. He called up certain units for the Berlin crisis. So while I was off with that, we went to Europe and the Baltic and so forth. And I was asked if I wanted to stay in the Navy. I only had a 1-year commitment as an active duty reservist. Do you want to stay in? You're welcome to. Right now you can re-enlist, retain your rank, and so forth. And I had just been promoted by that time. So I took it. It sounded like an offer I couldn't refuse. My wife was not happy with it, but I assured her that compared to construction work, where you every week to week you don't know if you're going to get laid off, this is a really steady job, and I love it, and I'm sure we can make it go. So we did that. I re-enlisted, and then I stayed for a total of 22 more years, total of 26 years. Along came Vietnam. I was on the East Coast on a destroyer, and the Bureau of Naval Personnel came out with a letter asking for volunteers to go to Vietnam. I thought, well, I'm representing myself as a sailor in the United States Navy, and I'm here on the East Coast, and I just had orders to go to a submarine repair ship in Key West. That sounds like wonderful duty, and I'm sure it is. It was. But I thought, that's not what I'm here for. I'm on the Vietnam volunteer list. I spoke to my detailer, and he agreed to whip me out to the West Coast. He said, I don't have anything for you in country right now, but we can get you on a ship that's going over there. So, to make a long story short, I wound up on an ammunition ship, but my request kept on. It was valid, and eventually they had the opening, and I was sent to counterinsurgency training in Coronado, California, weapons training at Camp Pendleton, and then over to Vietnam. I got there in almost the last days of 1967, and I was then sent to my duty station, which was affiliated with naval headquarters, but it was a repair activity in Saigon. Not a bad job. And a month after I got there, the Tet offensive started, and then things were changed completely. So anyway, I went on with that just a brief time, and during the time that, and incidentally, I think that our troops and the Vietnamese did an admirable job in quelling that insurrection, that terrible blast that they made at Tet. So unlike the perception that the news media seemed to have here, and when I heard that they're predicting this is the death knell, this is the end of it, you know, we're never going to be able to win because of the Tet offensive, when the Tet offensive was a great victory for Vietnam and for our forces. But anyway, I won't preach. That's how I felt about it, and I still do. And anyway, we then, about that time, the opening occurred, and the Master Chief of Command billet in the, I was interviewed by the Chief of Staff, and he decided I could handle that job. And so I got transferred out of the Naval Advisory Group, and I worked out of headquarters, answering to the Admiral, and via the Chief of Staff, of course. And I got blanket travel orders and proceeded to travel around the country. Visited all these various units that we had. I wanted to participate. I didn't want to be known as a Saigon warrior, so I volunteered for a lot of patrols and so forth. And I kept on the road pretty much, and wrote decent reports. And just after being on that job only a couple of months, and change of command, and Admiral Veff, Rear Admiral Veff, his tour was up, and Vice Admiral Zumal took over. Brand new Vice Admiral, and he hit the headquarters like a rocket. He was so different. So one of the first things he did, says, "Do I have a Master Chief of Command?" Yeah, someone said, "Yes." I want to see him. So I was summoned to see the great man. And he had my reports that I had made up to that time. He said, "These are great." He said, "This is exactly what I want you to do. Keep doing this, and every time you come back from a field trip, come and see me. Don't bother to go get cleaned up and spiffied up or anything. When you get into Saigon, come right to me and see me. I won't judge your appearance." Okay. And which I did from then on. I come all sturdy and sweaty and poorly shaven and so forth. I wasn't that bad, because we did have facilities even in the field. But in any case, I got along very well with him. I found quickly that everything I asked for, I would get. No matter what the request was, and I didn't bother him with trivia, of course. But if there was a really serious problem somewhere, I said, "We need some help on this or that." It happened. So that was great. And that went on for a few months, and then my tour was up. And I was sorely tempted to extend. You could extend your tour for 6 months. And at that time, my wife was not feeling too happy about where I was and all. And so I just left the country. And so someone, you're never indispensable, no matter how much you think you might be. So I left country. I went from there to, I got shore duty in Philadelphia at the inactive ship maintenance facility. And the captain decided that he created a new billet just for me. It was ship's disposal officer. Any ship that was there was decommissioned, but still on the naval vessel register, was subject to recall. And so any other ship that needed essential parts